"Take the cloth off," she begged. The rancher did it, and stood in horror. The sun was just rising over the rolling hills of the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. The early morning air smelled of fresh grass, earth, and the faint scent of hay from the barns. The ranch was quiet, except for the occasional lowing of cattle and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. It was a peaceful morning, the kind that made the long hours of ranch work feel rewarding rather than tiring. The rancher, a man known in the area for his strong work ethic and honesty, was already up. His boots were dusty from the previous day's chores, his hat pulled low over his brow, and his hands were rough from years of hard work. He had grown up on this land, learning every fence, every corral, and every trail in the wide expanse that made up his family's ranch. He loved it deeply, not just for the work, but for the quiet moments when the world seemed still, and the only sounds were those of nature and the animals he cared for. On this particular morning, the rancher had planned to check the fences along the east pasture. There had been recent storms, and he wanted to make sure none of the cattle had wandered into dangerous areas. He walked along the path he had taken countless times before, whistling softly to keep the cattle calm. His mind wandered over small, simple thoughts, the chores for the day, which animals needed feeding, and whether the old barn roof would hold through the next rain. He didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. Then he noticed movement near the edge of the property. At first, he thought it might be one of the neighbor's children playing, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a woman he didn't recognize. She seemed small and frail, her clothes disheveled, and her hands shaking as she held a cloth tightly in front of her. She looked around nervously, as if expecting someone or something to appear at any moment. The rancher approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Good morning," he said gently. "Can I help you?" The woman flinched at his voice but didn't move away. Instead, her eyes locked onto his, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, can you take the cloth off?" The rancher paused. He didn't understand at first. Take the cloth off, what did she mean? He looked around, trying to see if anyone else was nearby or if there was a hidden danger, but the ranch was quiet, just the way he liked it. His instincts told him to be careful. He had seen many things over the years: wild animals trapped in fences, sick cattle in need of immediate attention, and even the occasional person lost on the property, but nothing like this. "Take the cloth off," he repeated slowly, trying to keep his voice calm. "What do you mean, what's under the cloth?" The woman's hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the fabric. Her eyes filled with tears and her voice cracked as she pleaded. "Please, just take it off. I can't do it myself." The rancher's heart sank. He could see that she was genuinely terrified, but he didn't yet know why. His mind raced. Could she be injured? Was there something wrong with her health? Or something else entirely? He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had always helped people when they were in trouble, but this situation felt different. More personal, more urgent. Despite his confusion, the rancher stepped closer. He wanted to help, and he could see that hesitation might only make things worse. "Okay," he said softly. "I'll help, but you need to stay calm. I'm here to help you." The woman nodded quickly, relief washing over her face for just a moment before fear returned. She stepped aside slightly, allowing him to approach. The rancher noticed her hands were dirty, scraped, and trembling, as if she had been struggling with something for a long time. Her breathing was rapid, shallow, and uneven. He carefully reached out and took hold of the edge of the cloth. The moment his hands touched the fabric, he felt the tension in the air. There was a weight to it, not just in terms of physical presence, but in the emotional heaviness that seemed to radiate from her. He hesitated, his mind racing with questions, but he reminded himself. She had asked for help, and she trusted him enough to let him take this step. Slowly, with deliberate care, he began to lift the cloth. The woman's eyes were fixed on him, her hands clutching the edge of her clothing as if holding onto some fragile sense of security. She was shaking so much that it was clear she was struggling not to panic completely. The rancher's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what he would find beneath the cloth, but he knew it had to be serious if she was this afraid. As the cloth moved, the rancher noticed the first hint of something unusual. There was a mark, a bruise, a wound, or perhaps a stain, that immediately set off alarm bells in his mind. He had dealt with injuries and accidents before, but this felt different. It wasn't just physical. There was something about the way the woman flinched, the way she seemed frozen in fear that made him realize this was more than just an ordinary accident. He kept going, steady hands lifting the cloth further. The woman's eyes were wide, and her breathing became even more frantic. He could feel her tension through every trembling movement. She seemed to shrink back slightly, as if trying to hide from whatever truth was being revealed, but there was nowhere to hide. The rancher had to see, had to understand, had to know what he was dealing with. Finally, the cloth was lifted enough that he could see clearly, and in that moment the rancher's breath caught. Horror and disbelief washed over him like a sudden storm. He could not believe what he was seeing. It was worse than he had imagined, something he had never encountered before. His mind raced, trying to process the situation, to make sense of it, to figure out the next step. The woman's voice cut through his thoughts, fragile and desperate. "Please, help me. I didn't know what to do." Her words were filled with shame and fear, but also a faint hope that he could save her from whatever danger or harm she was in. The rancher nodded, even though he felt a surge of panic inside. He had to stay calm. He had to help her. He had faced storms, fires, and animal attacks before, but this was different. It required patience, courage, and a steady hand. Most importantly, it required compassion. He took a deep breath and assessed the situation. He could see now that immediate action was necessary. Every second mattered, and the woman's life, or at least her well-being, depended on him. He felt a mix of fear and determination. Fear because of the unknown and the shocking nature of what he had just uncovered. Determination because he knew he could not walk away, not when someone needed him this desperately. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rancher simply focused on staying calm, on thinking clearly, on planning his next steps. The woman clutched his arm lightly, as if seeking reassurance, and he gave a small nod to show her that he would not let her face this alone. Around them, the ranch remained quiet, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant cry of a bird. The calm of the morning contrasted sharply with the tension between them, making the moment feel surreal. It was as if time itself had slowed, holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The rancher realized he needed to act quickly but carefully. One wrong move could make things worse. He needed to be gentle, precise, and reassuring. And he needed to keep talking to her to keep her calm, to prevent her panic from escalating. "Everything is going to be okay," he said softly, his voice steady even though his mind was racing. "I'm right here. You're safe with me. Just breathe, okay?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. She whispered again, almost inaudibly, "Thank you, I didn't know what else to do." He gave a small, reassuring smile. "You did the right thing by asking for help. Now we'll take care of this together." The rancher carefully adjusted his grip, preparing to deal with what lay beneath the cloth fully. He knew the next moments would be critical, shaping the events that would follow and testing every bit of his experience, courage, and compassion. He could not yet imagine how this morning, so peaceful and ordinary just moments ago, would change his life and hers, forever. The wind rustled through the trees, the sun climbed higher in the sky, and the rancher steadied himself for what was about to unfold. Whatever horrors awaited beneath that cloth, he knew he could not turn away. He had a duty to help, to protect, and to face the unknown without hesitation. And in that quiet, tense moment, he made a silent promise to himself and to her. No matter what he saw, no matter how shocking, he would do everything in his power to help her survive and find safety. And so, with careful hands and a determined heart, he prepared to confront the truth hidden beneath the cloth. The rancher's hands stayed steady as he slowly pulled the cloth back further, revealing more of what lay beneath. The morning sun now fully touched the ranch, casting warm golden light over the hills, the barns, and the grazing cattle, but it did nothing to ease the tension that gripped him. He could feel his pulse quicken as the woman's eyes never left his. Her breathing was rapid, almost panicked, yet she didn't flinch as he continued to uncover the truth. As the cloth was finally removed, the rancher froze. He stood there for a moment, unable to speak, as shock and disbelief washed over him. He had seen injuries before, accidents on the ranch, even dangerous situations with animals or storms, but nothing like this. The sight before him made his stomach churn and his mind reel. The woman, small and fragile, was badly hurt, and the injuries were more severe than he could have imagined. The wound was deep and raw, and it was clear she had been in serious danger. There was blood, though thankfully not enough to be fatal yet, and signs of infection beginning to spread. Her skin was pale and clammy, and her eyes were wide with fear. The rancher's heart ached as he realized that this woman had been alone, struggling, afraid, and in pain with no one to help her until now. She looked up at him, trembling. "Please, please help me," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, weak, and desperate. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't ask anyone else." The rancher immediately realized that time was critical. This was no longer a simple situation where he could call for help and wait. She needed attention right away, and he was the only one there to provide it. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus despite the horror and panic swirling inside him. He had faced dangerous situations before, yes, but never had he felt so personally responsible for someone else's survival. "Stay calm," he said gently, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "I'm right here. We're going to get through this together. Just trust me." The woman's lips trembled, but she nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. She tried to smile weakly, though it didn't reach her eyes. I trust you," she said softly. The rancher carefully examined the wound, assessing how deep it was and what needed to be done. He had some basic knowledge of first aid from his years on the ranch. He had treated minor injuries, broken bones, and animal bites. But this required more than just skill. It required focus, courage, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. He grabbed a clean cloth from his saddlebag and gently began to clean the wound as best as he could. The woman winced at first, but he spoke softly, trying to calm her. "I know it hurts, but you're strong. We'll make sure this doesn't get worse." As he worked, she shivered, not just from the pain, but from fear. I didn't want anyone to see me like this," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know who to ask for help. I thought I might not make it." The rancher felt a surge of empathy. He had seen fear in people before, but the raw vulnerability in her eyes struck him deeply. "You're here now," he said firmly. "You're safe now. Nothing else matters except getting you through this." He continued cleaning the wound carefully, inspecting it to see if there were any broken bones or signs of infection. The woman's breathing slowly began to even out as he worked, though she still flinched with each touch. She tried to look away, but he gently guided her gaze back, maintaining a calm and reassuring presence. After some time, he realized he needed to stop the bleeding more effectively. He tore a strip of cloth from his own shirt, making sure it was clean enough, and carefully wrapped it around the wound. The woman bit her lip to keep from crying out, but she didn't resist. The rancher's hands were steady, and he spoke softly all the while, giving her encouragement. "There we go," he said finally, adjusting the makeshift bandage. "That should hold for now. You're doing really well, almost there." She exhaled shakily, relief mixing with exhaustion. "Thank you, I don't know what I would have done without you," she whispered. The rancher nodded, but there was no time to feel pride. He knew that this was only the first step. The wound was serious, and she needed proper medical attention as soon as possible. He looked around the ranch, calculating the fastest way to get her help. His mind raced through possibilities, calling an ambulance, driving her to the nearest town, or sending for someone else to assist. "Listen," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "We need to get you to a doctor. I can drive you to the clinic and they'll make sure you're okay. Can you manage that?" She hesitated, fear and shame flickering across her face. I don't want anyone to know what happened," she admitted. "I don't want to cause trouble." The rancher's expression softened. He understood that she felt embarrassed, but he also knew that her health and safety came first. "It's not trouble," he said gently. "What happened isn't your fault. You need help, and I'm here to make sure you get it. That's all that matters." She finally nodded, tears streaming down her face again. "Okay, I'll go with you." The rancher carefully helped her to her feet. She was weak and unsteady, and he supported her as they walked toward his truck. Along the way, she leaned heavily on him, grateful for his strength and calm presence. The ranch, so peaceful just moments ago, now seemed almost surreal. The sun glinted off the fields, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, but the danger and urgency of the moment hung in stark contrast. Once they reached the truck, the rancher helped her into the passenger seat. She shivered from both fear and cold, and he handed her a blanket from the back. "This will help keep you warm," he said. "You're doing great, almost there." He started the engine and drove carefully down the winding dirt road that led away from the ranch. Each bump and turn caused her to wince slightly, but he adjusted his driving to keep it as smooth as possible. She clutched the blanket tightly, her knuckles white, but she was beginning to relax just a little under his steady presence. As they drove, she spoke quietly, telling him bits and pieces of what had happened. She had been alone when she got injured, trying to complete a task on her own. She had panicked, afraid that asking for help would cause shame or embarrassment. The rancher listened attentively, never interrupting, his focus entirely on keeping her safe and calm. The more she spoke, the more he realized how serious her situation had been. She had endured pain, fear, and isolation, and yet here she was, trusting a stranger enough to let him help her. That trust was something he could not take lightly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the clinic came into view. The rancher parked the truck and helped her out carefully, supporting her every step. The staff rushed out to meet them, taking over immediately and providing the medical care she needed. The rancher stayed with her, offering reassurance and explaining what had happened as best he could, until she was safely inside and in capable hands. He stepped back, taking a deep breath. Relief and exhaustion washed over him, but he didn't let himself relax completely. He knew the woman still needed support, and he wanted to make sure she was okay. As he watched her being treated, he felt a mix of emotions: shock at what he had witnessed, gratitude that he had been able to help, and a profound respect for the courage she had shown in asking for help when she needed it most. Even after she was settled in the clinic, he stayed nearby, making sure everything was taken care of. He spoke with the nurses and explained the situation in detail, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The woman's condition was stabilizing, and the immediate danger had passed, but he knew that the experience would leave a mark on both of them. The rancher reflected on the morning's events as he finally stepped outside into the bright sunlight. The ranch was quiet again, the cattle grazing peacefully, the wind rustling through the trees. But he knew that life had changed, for him and for her. He had faced something unexpected, something terrifying, and yet he had acted with courage, compassion, and determination. He knew that the woman's trust in him had been a powerful gift. She had been vulnerable, afraid, and in pain, and he had been the one she relied on. That realization weighed heavily on him, but it also gave him a deep sense of purpose. He had been able to help, and that was all that mattered. And as he walked back to his truck, ready to return to the ranch, he knew that this day would stay with him forever. The horror, the fear, the trust, and the relief, all of it had been real, raw, and unforgettable. The rancher had faced the unknown, and in doing so, he had proven not only his strength and skill, but also his heart. The rancher had thought that once the woman reached the clinic, the worst was over. But as he watched the nurses and staff take over, he realized that the struggle was far from finished. The wound was serious, deeper, and more complicated than anyone had initially seen. Infection had already started to set in, and the woman's body was weak from shock and pain. The rancher felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had managed to get her help, but now the real fight for her recovery was beginning. He stayed nearby, pacing outside the clinic as he tried to think. He had been through emergencies before, but this was different. This wasn't a simple accident on the ranch or a stray animal bite. This was something that had happened while she was alone, and it had gone unnoticed for hours. He felt anger, not at her, but at the circumstances. How could anyone survive alone like that without help? And yet she had found the courage to call on him even when she didn't know him. That strength impressed him more than he could put into words. Hours passed as the rancher waited. The sun moved higher in the sky, and the clinic buzzed with activity around them. He saw the doctor come out several times to speak with the nurses, their faces serious. His stomach twisted with worry, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help anyone. All he could do was stay nearby and support her in the way he could. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor approached him. "She's stable for now," he said. "The wound was worse than it looked, but we managed to stop the infection from spreading. She'll need rest and monitoring, but she's going to be okay." Relief washed over the rancher like a wave. He exhaled slowly, feeling tension leave his shoulders. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice still tight with emotion. "Thank you for saving her." The doctor nodded. "You did your part too. Getting her here quickly made all the difference. You acted fast, and that helped more than you know." The rancher shook his head slightly. He wasn't used to praise, especially for something that felt instinctual. He had simply done what needed to be done. But hearing it from the doctor made him realize that sometimes even small actions could have enormous consequences. As the afternoon sun began to wane, the rancher stayed close, making sure she had everything she needed. The woman was resting now, wrapped in blankets, her face pale but peaceful. She looked fragile, almost like a bird that had been through a storm and needed time to heal. He remembered the fear in her eyes earlier that morning and felt a mixture of sadness and admiration. She had been through so much alone, and yet here she was, alive and safe. Her eyes fluttered open and she looked around. When she saw the rancher, a weak smile crossed her face. You stayed," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't leave me alone." The rancher knelt beside her bed, keeping his tone calm and reassuring. "I told you I wouldn't," he said gently. "You needed help, and I promised you I'd stay until you were safe, and I'm here. Nothing has changed." She took a shaky breath and reached for his hand. Her grip was weak, but it was filled with trust and gratitude. I can't thank you enough," she said softly. "I was so scared, I didn't think anyone would help me in time." The rancher squeezed her hand lightly. "You did the right thing by asking for help. That's what saved you. Courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what's necessary even when you are. You did that." Even as he spoke, the rancher knew that the struggle wasn't over. She needed time to heal, both physically and emotionally. Being alone for so long had left a mark on her, and it would take patience and care to help her recover fully. He understood that the next days would require vigilance, attention, and unwavering support. The woman's condition began to stabilize, but there were moments when panic or fear returned. She would flinch at sudden sounds, or her breathing would quicken if she thought she was alone. The rancher stayed close, offering quiet reassurances. "You're safe now," he would say softly. "Nothing is going to hurt you here." Over the next few days, he visited her regularly, bringing small comforts from the ranch, a warm blanket, a fresh apple, a cup of tea. Each visit reminded her that she was not alone, that someone cared deeply about her safety. Slowly, she began to regain some of her confidence. She even managed small smiles, though they were tentative at first. Despite the relief that she was recovering, the rancher could not forget the moment when he first saw the wound. The horror, the fear, and the urgency of that morning stayed with him, lingering in his mind like a shadow. He found himself reflecting on it often, thinking about how quickly life could change and how fragile safety could be. One evening, as the sun began to set, he sat beside her bed while she rested. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the hospital equipment and the occasional footsteps in the hallway. She looked at him, eyes filled with curiosity and gratitude. "I still can't believe you helped me," she said quietly. "You didn't even know me, and yet you didn't hesitate." The rancher looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to help them," he said thoughtfully. "You just see that they're in trouble and you do what's right. That's all there is to it." Her eyes glistened with tears and she gave a small nod. I hope I can be as brave as you someday," she whispered. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You were brave today, you asked for help when you needed it. That takes more courage than most people will ever show. Don't forget that." The hours passed quietly, and the rancher stayed until the staff assured him she was stable and resting comfortably. When he finally left, he walked back through the quiet streets, reflecting on the past few days. The experience had changed him. He had always known that helping others was important, but seeing someone in real danger, seeing the raw fear and vulnerability in her eyes, had made the lesson unforgettable. He returned to the ranch, tired but determined. There were still chores to be done, animals to care for, and fences to check. But even as he worked, his mind returned to the woman and the events of that morning. He knew that her recovery would continue, and he hoped that she would find strength and confidence again. The rancher also thought about trust, that fragile, delicate thing that can be broken so easily, yet can also save lives. The woman had trusted him completely, and that trust had allowed him to help her. It was a powerful reminder that human connection and courage were sometimes the most important tools we have. As night fell, he sat on the porch of the ranch, looking out over the darkened fields. The stars began to twinkle in the sky, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. He felt a quiet sense of satisfaction mixed with a lingering weight of responsibility. He had acted when it mattered most, and in doing so, he had changed the course of someone's life forever. The rancher knew that the struggle was not over. Healing, both physical and emotional, would take time. But he also knew that he had made a difference, that he had faced fear and uncertainty and chosen to act with courage and compassion. And that was something that would stay with him always. As he finally retired for the night, he thought about the woman, her bravery, and the trust she had placed in him. He hoped that she would continue to heal, to regain her strength, and to remember that even in the darkest moments, help and kindness could be found. And he knew that, should she ever need him again, he would be there without hesitation. The rancher's life had been full of hard work and quiet days on the ranch, but this experience had reminded him of something far more important: the power of courage, the weight of responsibility, and the lasting impact of compassion. He had faced horror, uncertainty, and fear, and he had chosen to act. And in that choice, he had found something remarkable, not just in saving her life, but in discovering the strength and humanity that exists when we face the unknown together. Days passed slowly yet steadily as the woman continued her recovery at the clinic. The rancher visited every morning, bringing small comforts from the ranch: a warm blanket, a cup of tea, or a simple sandwich he had packed himself. Each day he stayed with her for a while, making sure she was calm, comfortable, and reassured. Though the initial horror had passed, the experience had left a mark on both of them. There was still tension, still fear, but it was slowly giving way to relief and gratitude. She had begun to regain her strength. The wound was healing well under the careful attention of the doctors and nurses, and the infection that had threatened her had been controlled. But the emotional wounds, the fear, and the lingering memory of being alone and helpless were slower to heal. The rancher knew this. He understood that healing was more than physical. It was about feeling safe, feeling supported, and regaining confidence. One morning she looked up as he entered the room, her eyes brighter than they had been in days. "I think I'm finally starting to feel normal again," she said softly. "Thanks to you." The rancher shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "You did most of the work yourself," he said. "You were brave enough to ask for help. That was the hardest part." Her lips curved into a small, tentative smile. "I guess I didn't realize how scared I really was until it was over," she admitted. "I thought I'd be on my own forever, and then you came." He nodded, understanding completely. "Fear has a way of making everything feel worse, but the important thing is that you didn't face it alone. You let someone help you. That takes strength." They shared a quiet moment, looking at each other without words. It was a bond born of a shared struggle, of trust in the face of fear, and of relief that the worst had passed. For the rancher, it was a reminder of why he did what he did every day on the ranch, not just tending to animals or fences, but helping people when they were in real need. Over the next week, the woman's recovery continued. She began to walk around the clinic room slowly, with the rancher nearby for support. Each step was hesitant at first, but with encouragement she grew steadier. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," she said one afternoon, looking out the window at the bright sun and green fields beyond. "It's like I can finally see the world without fear." The rancher nodded. "That's exactly how it should feel. You've been through a lot, but you're coming back stronger than before. Don't forget that." Their conversations grew lighter as the days passed. She told him small stories about her life before the incident, about her family, her home, and her dreams. The rancher listened carefully, offering gentle guidance when she needed it and encouragement when she doubted herself. The bond between them deepened, not just as rescuer and rescued, but as two people connected by a shared experience and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun began to set, the woman turned to him with a serious expression. "I don't know how to ever repay you," she said quietly. "You saved my life, and I don't even have the words for that." The rancher shook his head, smiling gently. "You don't need to repay me. Just living, just recovering, that's enough. Seeing you safe and healthy is all the reward I need." Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief rather than fear. "I never imagined anyone would care enough to stay by my side," she said. "I thought I'd have to face it all alone." "You weren't alone," the rancher said firmly, "and you never will be again. Sometimes we need someone to be there for us, to remind us that we're not as powerless as we think. That's all I've done." By the end of the week, the doctors finally gave her the approval to leave the clinic. The rancher helped her gather her things, ensuring she had everything she needed for the journey back home. As they stepped outside into the warm sunlight, she took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs. For the first time in days, she felt free, unburdened by pain and fear. As they drove back toward the ranch, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I can't believe I'm still here. I can't believe I survived all of that." The rancher glanced at her, his expression calm but full of empathy. "You survived because you were brave enough to ask for help," he said. "You made it through, and that's what matters. You're stronger than you think." When they arrived at the ranch, she paused at the edge of the property, taking in the familiar fields, the fences, and the quiet hills beyond. It was peaceful, almost like the world had returned to the way it should be. She turned to the rancher, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." He nodded, tipping his hat slightly. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just remember what you've learned here. Courage, trust, and hope can carry you through the darkest times." As she walked toward her own home, she looked back once, seeing the rancher standing there on the porch, watching over the ranch he loved so much. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his help, but for the calm strength he had shown, for the reassurance he had provided, and for the kindness that had kept her alive and safe. The rancher returned to his work, repairing fences and tending to the animals, but he carried the memory of that morning with him. The fear, the horror, the desperate plea for help, it had left a permanent mark. He thought about how quickly life could change, how fragile safety could be, and how important it was to be ready to act when someone needed help most. Over time, the story of that day spread quietly through the small community. Neighbors spoke of the rancher's bravery and calm presence, and the woman shared her story of survival and courage. People were inspired not just by the danger she had faced, but by the strength of character and the compassion the rancher had shown. Yet for the rancher, the reward was not recognition or praise. It was the knowledge that he had done what needed to be done, that he had made a real difference in someone's life. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, in a moment of fear and desperation, he had acted with courage and kindness. As the weeks passed, the woman regained her strength completely. She returned to her normal routines, but she carried with her the lessons of that day. The importance of trust, the courage to ask for help, and the knowledge that even in moments of extreme fear, someone could be there to protect and support her. She often thought of the rancher, of his steady hands, calm voice, and unwavering presence, and she felt deep gratitude for the man who had saved her life without hesitation. The rancher, meanwhile, continued his days on the ranch, tending to the land and animals as he always had. Yet the experience had changed him too. He had seen the fragility of life in a new light, and he understood more deeply the importance of being ready to act, of staying calm under pressure, and of offering help to those who need it most. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that courage and compassion could make all the difference in the world. In quiet moments, as he watched the sun set over the hills, he often thought about that morning, the cloth, and the fear in her eyes. He remembered the weight of responsibility, the shock of the sight he had seen, and the relief of knowing he had acted in time. It stayed with him as a reminder that life was unpredictable, that courage could take many forms, and that even ordinary people could be heroes when faced with extraordinary circumstances. And so life on the ranch returned to its normal rhythm, quiet mornings, long days of work, and peaceful evenings under the stars. Yet beneath that calm, both the rancher and the woman carried the memory of the day that had changed everything. The fear, the horror, and the relief had shaped them, leaving a lasting impression of courage, trust, and the extraordinary power of human kindness. The rancher knew that he would never forget her plea, the moment he lifted the cloth and the horror he had faced. But he also knew that he would never regret acting, never regret staying calm, and never regret showing compassion. That day had reminded him of what truly mattered, helping others, protecting the vulnerable, and standing firm even when faced with fear. The woman, now fully recovered, often reflected on the same day, realizing that her survival was not just a matter of luck but of courage and trust. She had learned that asking for help was not weakness, but strength. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, someone could rise to the occasion and change the outcome entirely. And she had learned that there are people in the world who act without hesitation, offering support and care without expecting anything in return. The rancher and the woman remained connected in small ways, through quiet visits and occasional messages. Their bond was subtle but profound, rooted in the shared experience that had tested both of them and ultimately brought hope and reassurance. Both knew that life could be fragile, but they also knew that courage, trust, and compassion could carry people through even the most frightening moments. And as the rancher looked out over his fields at the end of each day, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The world could be unpredictable, dangerous, and terrifying, but he had proven to himself that he could act when it mattered most. He had faced horror, uncertainty, and fear, and he had chosen to do what was right. That was the true reward, the knowledge that he had made a difference, that he had helped someone survive, and that he had stood firm in the face of fear.